Today we're looking at the disappearance of Heather Elvis, a case that is supposedly solved but at the same time feels completely unfinished. Heather Elvis vanished early in the morning on December 18, 2013 in South Carolina, and the circumstances leading up to it were, to put it mildly, like a script from a bad TV show. Just before she disappeared, she was having an affair with a married man named Sidney Moorer, but this relationship had reportedly ended a couple of months before her disappearance. And of course, everything exploded when Sidney's wife, Tammy Moorer, found out about the affair. And this woman, as we'll see, was absolutely nuts. On the very day of Heather's disappearance, Heather, was supposed to meet with Sidney. This case has some very strange and telling surveillance footage, interviews, and text messages, so let's just dive into this mess. Heather Rachel Elvis was born on June 24, 1993, in Horry County, South Carolina. Growing up, she was generally a very artistic person, which you can clearly see from her Twitter, and honestly, just someone who loved connecting with other people. After graduating high school in 2011, she got a job as a waitress at the Tilted Kilt in Myrtle Beach, and she also worked at the House of Blues in North Myrtle Beach. All while studying cosmetology, she moved into an apartment in Carolina Forest with her roommate Brianna Warrelman, who also worked at the Tilted Kilt. The problems, as they often do, started in June 2013. Heather was working at that same Tilted Kilt when a man named Sidney Moorer came in to fix some kitchen equipment. Sidney was a local, born in Myrtle Beach, and owned his own business called Palmetto Maintenance, which provided maintenance and repair services for industrial equipment in area restaurants. He was 18 years older than Heather, 38 at the time, but it seems Heather had a thing for older men, and to be fair, even though Sidney was married, his wife seemed, well, let's just say, a very difficult person anyway based on her Twitter. Heather was really into him from the start, although she uses slightly different language to describe her feelings. They start flirting, and strangely enough, it grows into something more serious with each passing week. Yeah, the affair unfolded, and they didn't seem to be hiding it at all. Sidney would regularly stop by when Heather was working, bringing bagels and coffee. He even discussed with friends the possibility of hiring her as a babysitter for Sidney and Tammy's kids, which is just weird in itself. However, it seems that by mid-September, their relationship had formally ended. But the drama didn't stop there, because in October, Sidney's wife, Tammy, finally finds out the truth. I'm honestly genuinely surprised it took her that long to find out about the affair, considering Sidney and Heather weren't keeping it a secret at all. So when Tammy finds out, she completely loses all control and starts methodically harassing Heather. She made Sidney call Heather while she stood by and listened, and forced him to publicly humiliate the girl. Heather's roommate, Brianna, was there during this call. And Sidney reportedly said things like, she was nothing to him, just someone who spreads her legs. Lovely words from a grown man. But that wasn't enough for Tammy. She started sending Heather text messages and photos of her and Sidney engaged in, let's just say, marital duties. Seriously, nobody needs to see that. It's just disgusting. It gets worse. Tammy password protected Sidney's phone so only she could use it. She handcuffed him to their bed every night and accompanied him absolutely everywhere he went outside the house. Tammy also made Sidney get a tattoo of her name on his stomach, which, you know, is totally normal behavior for a sane person, and Tammy just kept harassing Heather, even though the relationship had supposedly ended, though. I guess she had a right to be angry, but this turned into round-the-clock sending of horrible messages. Tammy even tried to get Heather fired from her job at the Tilted Kilt, regularly calling the restaurant and threatening that her husband would stop repairing their equipment as long as Heather continued to work there, which caused Heather to start losing work hours. On November 5th, which was the last time Heather saw Sidney, at least that's what we can confirm, Heather retweeted some joke, and apparently, Tammy really didn't like that. On November 19th, Sidney, Tammy, and their kids left South Carolina for a vacation to Disneyland. Tammy reportedly just adored Mickey Mouse and everything related to it. They returned on December 11th. Around this time, things finally seemed to be looking up for Heather. It seemed like she was recovering from her toxic relationship with Sidney. She had just gotten a new job at a beauty salon and started going to church regularly with her best friend and roommate Brianna. Things were on the up, but there was one but. She was gaining weight, and specifically, as people said, weight similar to what happens after having a baby. Co-workers at the Tilted Kilt noted that her uniform had gone up 3 bra sizes. Heather was worried she might be pregnant, possibly by Sidney. Her manager at the Tilted Kilt said she took one pregnancy test, but it came back inconclusive, or the test was just broken, or something went wrong, of course. As these rumors started to spread and Tammy possibly found out about them, it undoubtedly drove her even more insane. So around this time, sometime in mid-December, Brianna left to spend the holidays with her family in Florida. So Heather was left alone in Carolina. On December 17th, Heather texted Brianna and told her she was going on a first date with a man she'd met named Stephen Schiraldi. Alright folks, listen closely. Now we're going to talk about the night she disappeared and go over the very rough but critically important timeline of what happened. According to Brianna, this was Heather's first official date since breaking up with Sidney, and Heather was excited to go that evening at 10 p.m. He drove her around in his car. They were looking at Christmas lights on houses in the area. Later, they went to a parking lot where he taught her how to drive his manual transmission car, and she even sent a picture of this moment to her father. Then Stephen dropped Heather off at her apartment around 1:15 a.m. At 1:19 a.m., now December 18th, Sydney, that same Sydney, was spotted on surveillance video at a local Walmart buying a pregnancy test. I wonder who that could be. For 20 minutes later, a call came from a payphone to Heather's cell phone, which lasted 5 minutes. Right after that, Heather called Brianna in Florida, saying Sydney had just called. He supposedly planned to leave Tammy and wanted to meet her immediately, to which Brianna logically replied, "Are you serious? Don't go to him. What are you even doing?" Apparently, Heather was extremely upset during this call. Then, at 2:29 a.m., Heather's phone tried to call that same payphone Sydney had used, but there was no answer. It seems that over the next half hour, Heather's phone received a call at the Longbeards Bar and Restaurant in Carolina Forest. At 2:57 a.m., her phone headed towards Augusta Plantation Drive, but then turned around and she returned to Longbeard's Bar. It looks like she was driving somewhere, but changed her mind at the last second at 3:16 a.m. as Heather was leaving Longbeard's. She tried to call Sydney from her cell phone, but no one answered. Then she returned to her apartment, tried to call Sydney again, and this time he answered. The conversation lasted about 4 minutes. Heather was in her apartment, Sydney was at his house. Then, around 3:30 a.m., Heather's phone moved to a secluded wooded area in Myrtle Beach called Peachtree Boat Landing. Around this same time, a surveillance camera captured a dark F-150 moving from the direction of the Moore's house towards this boat landing. It was later confirmed to be Sydney's vehicle at 3:38 a.m. Heather's phone tried to call Sydney, but no one answered, and she tried to do this several times in a row. Then, at 3:42 a.m., Heather's phone no longer responded to the network. At 3:47 a.m., that same camera captured the truck, the same F-150, moving from the direction of the boat landing and returning towards the Moore's house. Later, Tammy and Sydney would claim that they were just out for a drive that night, driving around secluded corners of Myrtle Beach, and it just so happened, what an incredible coincidence, that they ended up in the same place, at Peachtree Boat Landing, at the same time as Heather, in the middle of the night while Heather was there alone. Just amazing, to run into people like that at that hour. What are the chances, really? The next morning, Heather's father, Terry, started to worry after not hearing from her. He called the police, and they found Heather's car abandoned at Peachtree Boat Landing. They see that it's pretty messy inside, but supposedly nothing out of the ordinary, and Terry, having a spare set of keys, just gets in and drives Heather's car home, effectively destroying any potential evidence or fingerprints that might have been in the car. After that, we never see Heather again, and I've never been able to find out much additional information about the condition of Heather's car. If there was more information, that's all we know, so as time goes on, Heather is still nowhere to be found. However, to this day, a missing persons case has been opened for her.
Day 20 in the search for missing 20-year-old Heather Elvis. On Saturday, dozens of cars and horse trailers lined the heavily wooded area around Ronald McNair Boulevard, just off Highway 501 in Myrtle Beach. Groups of volunteers continued to help in the search.
The man she was on a date with, Stephen Schiraldi, was of course quickly cleared. The search of the area around the boat landing found absolutely no trace, just like a thorough search of the riverbed. Like I said, Sydney and Tammy were questioned, and questioned by all accounts to the fullest, but they drastically changed their story every time. It was a classic. "Oh yeah, I called her." Then, "Oh wait, no, I didn't call." "Your phone records are nonsense. I have no idea what's happening. Who is Heather or whatever?" And the search for Heather Elvis would continue, but they would never find anything. No leads, no trace of her further existence.
When was the last time you talked to her before that 3 or 4 minutes?
Oh, shit, probably into October, beginning of November, right in there somewhere.
So you hadn't talked to her?
Oh, no. It was like well before, because we went on vacation. It was well before we went on vacation. And there was nothing. The last
No
thing.
contact or anything?
Yeah, there was the last thing that was sent or anything was she sent a period to me, and that was it.
And that was through text messages or phone calls?
And I didn't.
Did she normally text or call?
Usually it was text.
Because you can delete them a little easier? Or
Well, no, that's just usually the way we talk. Because
when did your wife find out that that was kind of going on?
about the end of October.
End of October. Okay. Now,
and she asked, "What do you want to do?" And I mean, at first I didn't tell her what was going on.
Had she ever met her?
No.
Never seen her, never met her?
Nope. And then the following day, I told my wife what was going on, and my wife actually talked to her, and they had planned a meeting, and she didn't show up for the meeting.
How'd you start your relationship? Just
a couple of the girls had said, "Hey, Heather had a dream about you, like a nasty dream or something." And I'm like, "Okay, good." And then, I would go on about my business. And like 2 or 3 times that kind of happened. And then, we just kind of we would talk a little more every time in person. And then she started calling me. and I still don't know how she got my phone number, but she started calling me.
And this is
And
around,
it kind of led
do you
on
think? Summer?
mid-September or somewhere,
Mid-September.
maybe.
Okay.
So
she started texting or calling you, and you could
Yeah.
calling her back. I mean, she's a young, pretty girl.
Yeah.
You know.
And she was interested in.
There was a phone call made to Heather that night from a payphone at the gas station on 10th Avenue.
Okay.
And we have video from that.
Okay.
Did you try calling her? Just a minute?
No.
A second? You sure?
Maybe.
Okay, how about we start again?
I did. I called her from the
Okay,
phone.
let's start from the start again, because
I know.
I don't know you. You don't know me.
I know. In the whole story, everything's legit.
Okay.
I
Let's
did
go
call.
back to the part where it stopped being legit and
Okay.
start from the.
Well, no, I did call her on the payphone.
Okay. And what did you say?
I asked her to please leave me alone because she had been leaving notes on her car when I was at work.
To call and say, "Leave me alone," to a woman
Yes.
who hasn't contacted.
You need to start over.
Yeah, let's start over. Because
That ain't flying, boss.
But you guys don't understand. I had boyfriends. We had an open marriage.
Okay.
That's okay. I could care less if he had sex with 100 people.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it doesn't bother me. So, I mean, this girl, I can tell you just by, as an outsider looking at the Twitter, which I didn't know existed until all this went down, she's not right. She's not normal. I was 20. I partied with bands constantly. I wasn't that kind of girl. And believe me, I had the friends to make me that kind of girl, and I didn't do it. So there's something not right with her.
You know, I'm not assuming that anything's happened to this girl. She could be running around for all.
That's what I'm thinking, too. She could just be, but that.
In February, so 2 months after Heather was last seen, Sidney suddenly filed several complaints that he, poor guy, was being harassed. He claimed that some unknown people were shooting at him, his family, and his truck, and what's more, that their pets were being mutilated and killed. It sounded horrible, but there was one small problem. The police had zero evidence that any of this had actually happened to the Moorer family. Tammy, of course, supported her husband and also claimed on social media that their family was being terrorized, and on her Facebook she wrote about how corrupt all the police in the area were. Coincidence or not, it was in February that the police finally executed a search warrant on the Moorer's house. Inside was a complete mess, and they found a lot of weapons. But most importantly, they got that same surveillance footage of Sidney and Tammy diligently cleaning their truck, that same F-150, and they were doing this just a few days after Heather's disappearance. After a long 11-hour search, Sidney and Tammy were finally arrested. They were charged with murder, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and to top it off, 2 counts each of indecent exposure. These last charges were based on explicit sexual images found on their phones, which were taken in public places, and Sidney got the obstruction of justice charge for denying using that same payphone to call Heather that night, and this was despite the police having video footage clearly showing him standing right by that phone. In early 2015, the couple was quietly released from jail after posting bail. Heather's family, to put it mildly, was not very happy about this. They stated that the Moorers should be kept in jail, as the Elvis family had begun receiving death threats from people who supported the Moorers' absurd claims of their complete innocence and some grand conspiracy. And what's strange, many people in the community really did take Tammy and Sidney's side, mostly because of how actively they portrayed Heather on social media. They slandered her, saying she was crazy, a stalker, a husband stealer, and that they were the completely innocent victims. You see, they were just trying to be a family, and then this Heather shows up, and their supporters started writing that she essentially got what she deserved. Just awful. The court, however, did order Sidney and Tammy to agree to GPS monitoring of their location, to stay 5 miles away from the Elvis family home at all times, and to avoid any interaction with them on social media. But by September 2015, the court allowed the Moorers to quietly move to Florida, where Sidney had supposedly found a job, and all this was happening while the case was still pending.
First, talking about the last day Heather Elvis was seen, a day when he says she left notes on his car at work.
So I called her, told her, said, hey, look, I don't know if it's notes that you're, whatever. Enough's enough. Stop calling me. Stop texting me. She says, I don't know why it has to be like this or something like that. And I'm like, look, you just need to stop. It wasn't what you think it was. It was just...
Moorer says he stopped the relationship months before after his wife Tammy found out. He says Tammy only spoke with Heather on the phone, and that conversation was about leaving him.
She started talking to her about, hey, will you go to an attorney with me to get a divorce? And she said, sure, no problem.
Back to the day Elvis's car was found at Peachtree Landing, Moorer says he started receiving phone calls. One from Terry Elvis, Heather's father, the next from detectives. He told them he had talked to Heather the day before, but had not seen her since October.
At this point, did you know what was going on?
I didn't know exactly. They said that they hadn't heard from her, but I had been told by friends and stuff that it had happened a lot. I cooperated from the very first time anyone contacted me. I never said, call my attorney, I'm not talking to you, none of that.
Do you feel like people know that?
No, I don't think they do. When they came and asked to look in our house, we let them look in our house with no warrant. Look around, do what you want to do.
And then, just 6 months later, something happens that makes absolutely no sense. The murder charges against Sydney and Tammy were dropped, just like that. And the why here is the key question.
Why did they drop that murder charge against this couple?
Hey, good morning, Brad. Well, the media reached out to officials and they couldn't give a comment as to why the charges have been dropped. However, Sydney and Tammy Moore are still being charged with kidnapping. Now, they are connected to the disappearance of Heather Elvis, but police say even though they have never found a body, they still believe that she was killed.
You see, a year and 3 months passed, and so in June 2016, the trial for kidnapping finally began. For now, it was only against Sydney, and during this trial, the jury heard absolutely all the dirty details of this weird triangle. After 11 hours of deliberation, the decision was almost made. A vote of 10-2, 10 jurors were ready to convict, but 2 dug in their heels for some reason. And now, supposedly, it turned out that one of these 2 jurors was a buddy of Sydney's lawyer. What a convenient coincidence. So anyway, the judge had no choice but to declare it a mistrial. The case fell apart, and Sydney, obviously feeling untouchable, continued to spew all sorts of nonsense on Facebook. But in July 2017, another trial began, this time against both Mooras for obstruction of justice. This was basically for that same stupid lie. Because Sydney initially denied he had called from payphones, and of course the reason he called Heather from a payphone in the first place instead of his cell was because he thought he was the smartest. He took all the SIM cards out of his phone so he couldn't be tracked, but apparently forgot about the surveillance cameras, and this time the trick didn't work. Sydney was found guilty of obstruction and sentenced to 10 years in prison. This is the maximum sentence for this specific crime, at least some justice. Next, in April 2018, a grand jury indicted Sydney and Tammy again. This time on one count, conspiracy to kidnap, since that first trial against Sydney was a mistrial. The prosecution basically started over, but now against both of them, in October 2018, Tammy faced trial first on these new charges. After an 11-day trial, the jury found Tammy guilty. It only took them 4 hours of deliberation. She was sentenced to 60 years in prison. And then, in September 2019, it was Sydney Moorer's turn. He was also convicted of kidnapping Heather Elvis, just like his wife.
If I could give them closure, I would. I mean, anything I tell them would be a lie. There's nothing I can tell them to give them any closure. I understand I have children. I get it. There's just nothing I can give them for closure.
Right. Well, thank you, sir.
I know they suffered probably way more than I has, and I feel bad for them, I really do. Nothing I can give them. I'm sorry that I can't.
But neither Sydney nor Tammy ever revealed what really happened to Heather Elvis that night, and both, of course, continued to insist on their complete innocence. They claimed they never had anything to do with it and have no idea what happened to her, and unfortunately, this is the main tragedy. No one except them has any idea what happened to Heather. In fact, there were never any real leads, traces, or evidence that would lead to her body. I mean, we don't just suspect Tammy and Sydney, they are convicted, but the picture is incomplete, and of course, the Moorer's lawyer is now suing the police department. The defense claimed they know what happened and that the wrong people are in prison, but I honestly find that very unlikely. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and if you want to check out more of my videos, I, as always, will see you very soon in the next one. Thanks again, take care, and don't kill anyone.